Every wrong is recorded. Every slight against us. Page after page, etched in blood. Clan Gunnison, Karak 8 Peaks, Joseph Bookman. The Urks must pay. Let them come.
Oh, Dwarves, you are a ridiculous faction. If only Tyrion Lannister had some of your might, he might not have been injured at the Battle of Blackwater. This probably should have been my first guide in all due honesty, as the Dwarves are by far and away the easiest legendary campaign I've ever had to go through. If you're new to playing the game on this difficulty, this right here is your starting point. Not only is their playstyle very forgiving for newcomers, mostly consisting of setting up your forces in a strong position and letting the enemy come to you whilst you hammer them with range units, but there's very little micromanagement involved. Just set up your box and let the enemy crash over your defences. Dwarves are crazy cost effective, with even the most basic dwarven warriors being able to outclass most other infantry, despite being a low tier unit. This means that you can simply auto-resolve your way to victory on a great number of battles just due to their absurd starting stats. When you start, pick up Grombrindinol, the White Dwarf. He has an ability similar to the Beastman's, providing bonuses every few turns. We can get Thorgrim and Ungrim later on, but Grombrindinol is the best leader. A little bit weird seeing as he was always known as a lone wanderer, appearing where his people needed him most as opposed to a leader, but hey ho. You'll start out with a pretty strong strike team and some greenskins to the east. Waste no time taking the fight to them and play it on the battlefield to get an idea of how these guys play. Usually we would have artillery to force the enemy to come to us. Instead we have gyrocopters. Send them to start harassing the enemy, just be sure to move them out of range if the archers ever start firing. This will force them to come to us. Position your miners with blasting charges just off to the side so they can throw their explosives in when melee is engaged. Stagger your miners and dwarf warriors so there's a gap in between for your iron drakes to fire through. We want to get the enemy trapped between these units so that they can fire away while melee is joined. This isn't a strategy I would recommend online, but works well against the AI. Keep your quarrelers behind to harass and send the White Dwarf to headhunt the enemy war boss. When the enemy slam into your lines, drop your gyrocopter bombs onto the biggest mass you can find. With all the ranged fire, the enemy will likely rout very quickly. Even if your gyrocopters have run out of ammo, you can still send them in melee to cut down routing units. Your quarrelers can deal with the enemy archers quite easily. Take care of the arrow boys first, as the goblin archers fire arrows so small it can't do much against dwarven shields and armour. Capture the Pillars of Grungy and Mount Squighorn, focusing on defences and economic buildings. You will want to raise a second lord fairly quickly in this campaign. Orc incursions will continue from the north whilst we want to press into the south, so we'll need a smaller army to protect our home province whilst Grombrindal moves down south. Be sure to get good relations going with the other dwarf clans. We will want to build up our economy, keeping a small force to protect our homeland. Getting strong trade deals with the other dwarves can be a massive boon for our income. Be sure to build up defences in every settlement. At least in the early game, it's going to be very difficult not to let grudges mount, leading to a significant public order reduction which leads to greenskin incursions. The Paramour of Valea, the living ancestor event occurs, can help with public order, but only persists where Grombrindal is in the region. Otherwise, it's usually good to go for the Apprentice of Grungy to decrease the cost of Grombrindal's forces and subsequently allowing you to field more units for other armies, as well as increase the research rate of the hefty amount of research the dwarves have. Keep the basic quarrelers at all stages of the game. The upgraded great weapon quarrelers cost more and sacrifice their shield for a better melee weapon. As you don't want to be sending quarrelers into melee anyway, their biggest threat comes from ranged units. Having cheaper, better defended ranged units is far better than having them deal more damage in melee. Even with good trade and a strong economy, there's going to be times when you cannot get an army to defend a province in time. This is why walls are so important. Dwarves have some of the best defensive units in the game, and a hardy garrison can beat an army many times its size. I've noticed a weird hiccup in the AI when it comes to these defensive battles. If the enemy is intending to break down the gate using monstrous infantry like trolls, position some units directly inside the gatehouse. The enemies will run towards the gate and just stand there confused, allowing you to shoot them down. This won't work with battering rams or infantry focused armies however. Infantry will still scale your walls and battering rams will destroy your gates despite the fact the gates are still open. If you feel this is a kinda cheap and exploity tactic, you obviously don't have to do it. It can be kind of funny however for armies made up of wolf chariots to just stand there getting picked off by your towers. After all these years it seems Creative Assembly still struggles with siege battles. Now cleansing most of the Badlands should not be a horrendous feat. Your Dwarven infantry are so strong that they should be able to auto-resolve the majority of fights here. The only times you will have to take the Commander's Helm is when facing major settlements such as Black Crag, or if you find yourself surrounded by several armies at once. Even then you shouldn't struggle so much. Dwarves are known as a noob army for a reason. They require very little micromanagement to use effectively, and with proper placement of leader units will not rout until the last minute. The auto-resolve aspect of the game is really bad at taking into account factors such as magic and massively favours tough troops with high stats such as the Dwarves. At times it may be prudent to actually auto-resolve a battle than risk taking it on the ground. The strategy for fighting the greenskins largely remains the same. Have a strong bulwark of troops in your front line protecting your missile units. Try not to panic if goblins start shooting at you. Face your shielded dwarven units towards them and they will happily tank most of the damage. Focus your artillery and ranged units on their biggest threats first. Have a unit or two of melee in the back row just in case they do try to flank. If in doubt, just form a box around all of your troops. Now taking out the Urks shouldn't really be much of a challenge. They have a terrible habit of investing too much in goblin archers and spearmen who are going to struggle to penetrate dwarven armour. Once you've defeated the major tribes nearby, knuckle down and focus heavily on your economy. I made a mistake with my Orc campaign by confederating the neighbouring tribes too quickly, which led to chaos appearing much earlier than anticipated. It can be prudent to keep your dwarven allies as just that, allies for now, rather than expanding your borders through confederation. Once your major enemies are dealt with, you can disband unneeded forces and start to build up your dwarven empire in anticipation for the end times, to ensure that we have the best troops available. We don't want to wait for chaos to come to us, instead taking the fight to them so we can try and nip them in the bud early. You should hopefully have a few armies north now, encamped around the northern wastes. It's going to be hard to wipe them all out in one go, and chances are a few will still slip through the cracks and start marauding their way down south. Still, we can do our best to put the hurt on them here and now. When they do arrive, you will get a massive bonus with other factions. If you haven't done so already, take this opportunity to make alliances with the Empire, as well as Bretonnians, Wood Elves and any other smaller factions if possible. The extra trade is going to make our economy a tiny bit stronger, and with them on our side, we have one less aspect to worry about. Chaos units are tough, but we can go toe to toe with them. Our economy should be pretty baller by this point, and our Iron Breakers have some of the highest melee defense and armor, as well as leadership in the game. Although expensive, our economy should be in a good enough position that we can replace most of our dwarven warriors with them. They will hold the line almost indefinitely. The biggest threats to them come from monstrous infantry such as trolls, giants and shagoffs. These can be easily focused down by ranged weapons and artillery. The Chaos Warriors tend to go very light on ranged units, so bring gyrocopters to take out their hell cannons. Once these are gone, you can harass their troops almost for free. Steam guns are going to struggle with their armour, but the brimstones will shed through them. When they hit our wall of iron breakers, get copters running down the line, doing bombing runs to inflict as many casualties as possible. When not bombing, shoot the enemy in the back. focus down on armor piercing units as priority. If you want my personal advice, don't make the mistake I did here. Flame cannons are ridiculously expensive and not worth the price of admission. Organ guns are even worse. Similar to the Empire equivalent, there's nothing these guns can do that a unit of Thunderers can't do better. If you're going to use artillery, focus on the cheaper ones. Cannons are particularly good against the heavily armoured Chaos. Engineers are good for buffing your ranged units, whilst runesmiths will help you hold the line. Grovelers have decent piercing and are good for bringing down monsters. If you really want to put the hurt on their troops, however, bring Thunderers. I find them to be more reliable than Trollhammer torpedoes that seem to rely on AoE damage to really get their DPS out. Bring the Regiment of Renowned unit, however, the Scolder Guard in your main army if you can. These steam dudes rip through everything. It's just a shame we only get one of them. If you have any concerns about getting flanked, just camp your troops in a corner. This isn't multiplayer, so the AI can't be mad at you for being cheap. They are also generally quite bad at effectively dealing with a cornered army, and this gives you more time to harass them with gyrocopters if you have any. Whilst you're fighting away against Chaos, you'll find your affinity with all other Dwarven faction goes up massively. Use this time to start confederating with the other clans and expand your borders. Your obedience will drop when you do so if you haven't built enough pubs and taverns for the rowdy lot, be prepared for some greenskin incursions here and there. The Dwarves are so good at defending that you can safely let them attack you, however, and then wipe the floor with them in a siege defense battle. If you have any concerns, just leave an army in reserve to deal with them. Once the Chaos are taken out, we don't have much more to deal with. Confederate any Dwarven settlements still left. At this point, you should be so strong that it's not going to be hard to convince the remaining Dwarf holds to join your cause. If the vampires remain, they are likely to be your biggest threat. They will, however, not be nearly as much of a pain as Chaos were. Vampires typically need good use of magic to be effective, something the AI is not adept at doing. They will likely have taken a beating already and won't be able to field the kind of armies that Chaos could. The biggest threat against your infantry will be their monstrous units, as your melee troops will struggle to kill them. Only your slayers have an anti-large bonus, although I find focusing them down with Grovelers and other ranged units to be much more effective. Remember that your dwarves are short and monsters are very large. Even if they are engaged in melee, you can gun them down by shooting over the tops of your melee troops' heads. Crush them if you need to on your path to reclaiming the last dwarven holds and solidifying the dwarfs' resurgence on the old world. All in all, I got to say I'm a tiny bit disappointed with this campaign. As I mentioned earlier, the auto-resolve feature massively favours dwarves, which is why they are so often strength rank 1 when the AI take control of them. On legendary difficulty, it should not be safer to auto-resolve than take the fight yourself, yet it often is. Even your basic infantry are absurdly tough. Usually this would be offset with a high unit price, yet the dwarf's economy, both through trade and infrastructure buildings, is so strong that it scarcely matters. Add to this the bonuses you get with diplomatic relations through their research, and it means that almost everyone likes you. Make researching dwarven diplomats and dwarven emissaries a priority, two fairly early on research tech mind you, and you will only ever have to be at war with 1 or 2 opponents at a time. Seriously, just go for these first and you'll have a 30 plus diplomatic bonus from turn 10 onwards, making it very easy to pick and choose who you want to go to war with. They win across the board, and this is disappointing as I didn't feel like I had the opportunity to really learn the strengths and weaknesses of their units like I did with the other races. Some of my army compositions here at the end are atrocious, yet it didn't matter. I was still able to crush my enemies despite the bonuses they get on this difficulty. It's why I'm so glad they brought Clan Angrund in the King and the Warlord DLC. These campaigns provide the challenge needed to really get into the tactical nitty-gritty of the dwarves. For the time being, the dwarves serve as a stepping stone, a gateway into the franchise. If you're new to the game or to legendary difficulty, these guys are definitely where you need to start. They show you the new mechanics brought into the game without overloading you. If you're a veteran looking for something a bit more challenging, however, these guys are not for you. Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. I do hope you found it useful. If you could, please like, comment and subscribe, as it really helps me out. Anyways, until next time, kapow!